I'll talk a little bit about what I handed everybody. Did everybody get 2 handouts? So Marshall Ganz, if nobody has heard of Marshall Ganz, I'm excited to introduce you to him. And when the slides get brought up, the very last slide is a link to a Harvard class of his that he has posted online about community organizing and leadership roles and how to engage. Marshall Ganz was a leading voice in the civil rights movement. He was a California Jew who was raised that injustices shall not stand. And he's gone on to create some of the most well-respected programming around community organizing and creating value for change. There's a little bit, this is just one of his essays that was published. It was from a presentation that he did in 2008. This is when it was republished in 2009. Because I think a lot of the universal concepts that we are touching on here that Anne sort of hinted at, that we're all sort of chasing this same goal from a lot of different perspectives. And one of the universal concepts in that is that stories matter because we're all telling a story. And I find as a leader that the story you tell and then the skills, and we're going to talk a little bit about the actual nuts and bolts skills too, are how we engage allies for change. But Marshall Ganz said it first and a lot better than I did. He marched beside Dr. Martin Luther King. He's absolutely one of my heroes, so I'm happy to share him with you if you haven't. The other one is a worksheet. Brilliant. Hack. I love it. The other one is a worksheet that we're not going to do tonight. This is for you to take home, and then this will be on Basecamp because I find that this is a valuable tool whenever I'm working on a messaging project. This is something that I pull out and use again and again and again. It helps me get all these big picture of fluvial things and pin them down. So when we started this, we talked a lot about what will you do? And as leaders, we're all passionate about food and food systems. And we've really hit on a lot of the complexities tonight, but finding specifically, what are you going to do? There's a lot of different pathways, and I'm just going to pull out just a few of them. There's technical assistance, there's growing, there's farming, there's cooking, there's policy, there's community, funding. I mean, just a few of these things. So there's a lot of opportunities in funding, and there's a lot of different types of funding opportunities to engage as a pathway in. Grant writing is enormously helpful. Anne shared a story about how she was able to identify a grant, as did you. Identified a grant, it was captured, brought to town, and had a tangible impact on the community. But there's also opportunities to do investment, high-level financial investment, start a slow money investment group among many other models. There are ways to do that, to leverage capital to create tangible changes. What about just a regular old GoFundMe, Kickstarter-esque campaign to create an account to leverage a $10 giveaway for somebody's farmer's market to get the kids and their families back buying vegetables? So when I talk about funding, there's all these different ways that money comes into this system. Or you can get rid of money altogether and join the Bitcoin movement. But there's all of these opportunities out there. And if you're a money person, if you're a financial whiz, an accounting whiz, those are all things to start thinking about as a pathway to support change in the food system. Policy. Everybody sort of hinted at policy. There was a lot of overt and covert policy themes in tonight's presentations. Most importantly, I feel obligated to say, you could join the Food Policy Council. You could attend the meetings as a citizen and just hear. Bring those meetings and what's going on back to your neighbors and your church and your office. You can promote the cottage food law. Louisiana is one of the few states in the nation that has a cottage food law. We should be encouraging people to use that and to use it within the confines of the law.
Real quick, what's it called?
What is cottage food law?
Cottage food laws. I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, I know what it is.
Google.
Yeah,
Regional working groups. This could be the start of a statewide system. Strictly to address policy. How about we have a lobbying day where we take these voices to the Hill? What do you call it in Louisiana? Is it the Hill? What do you do when you go to the State House here? And I don't mean prison.
We do a lobby shop.
Right, yeah, well.
So you do.
Okay, so you go there and you lobby. There's community days where you can engage with all the elected officials, not just your own representatives, but statewide. You can make an appointment to talk to the governor. Someone has to coordinate that to make it happen. You have to get registered, you have to have an appointment, you got to have your act together. It's a really valuable tool. And we've seen it work really effectively at the statewide level. And you don't have to be anybody fancy to do it. You just have to do it. Policy is what makes our world spin. So there's lots of different ways to engage in policy. And I put up here a speakers guild, which doesn't automatically come up to mind as policy. But if you can have all of you train one additional person to have an elevator speech about your topic of interest that they can deliver in 3 minutes at a local meeting with your county judge, parish judge, at the parish judge? Police jurors meeting. You have an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes to them. They are obligated to listen. If you have someone who can deliver an elevator speech in 3 minutes that's eloquent, profound, and impactful, then you are influencing policy. Next slide, John. Community, host a meal, right? Host that meal, bring that table, set that place with good food. Have a progressive dinner. Have the businesses host it so you don't have to feel weird about having strangers traipse through your house and using your bathroom, right? Have a local business host each part of the progressive meal. Do a brunch, do a dinner, do something. Have all the volunteers cook the food. Building community, breaking bread at its most simple form came up several times tonight. Create a table, and I mean, that literally is, you build it, they will come. That mantra never works unless you're giving away good food. If you have good food, they will come. How about a book or a movie club? Partner with your library. Make sure the library's got all the jillions of really awesome documentaries that are out about food right now. There's so many. And there's some that are pro-local food and con-local food. Be brave. Show the ones that Monsanto paid for. I mean, have a dialogue. Get into this. Chew on it. Chew the fat, literally. Suck the marrow from the bones. Farmex. Everybody's all hot and bothered about TEDx, right? It's a big deal. Farmex happens in communities. Host a Farmex event. Let's all just talk about the most brilliant things we can think of about food. Give a platform for that and hand it a mic. Make it loud. Farm hacks. Hacks like what John did. Observations like DC. That's all about how we hack the system, right? Which some people hate that terminology and some people love it. I think it's great. I love it because that's what we're doing. We're subverting the dominant paradigm. There's a food system that we built and we're figuring out how to unbuild it. And we can unbuild it gracefully or we can blow it up. I'm not a fan of blowing it up. So hacks can be important. But farmhack.org, if you haven't seen it, check it out for everybody that likes tools and fixing things and figuring out cool systems. Farm hacks are neat. They tell you how to host local events. Next slide, John. Sorry.
Calm down, John.
Grow, farm, cook. There's a lot of people who wanted to participate tonight because they want to feel that they are acknowledged as leaders, but they're not here because they're busy farming. And we have some farmers at the table. Even if it's a one, plant in a pot, you're a farmer. What if it's, 200 plants in a pot? You're a farmer. Grow it, cook it, give it away, sell it. I don't care. But grow it. Raise it, butcher it, turn it into sausage, get messy, right? All of that. These are all pathways to the top of that mountain to rebuild this community-based food system that we're talking about. Technical assistance. That's already happening with this group. People are saying, I need this, I've got that. That's technical assistance, but it can get even more specific. At the very first meeting, someone said something about marketing, and you said, well, hey, I'm a really good photographer. Let me know if I can help you with that. That's technical assistance.
Brought my business card, help y'all out.
Right? It's networking, technical assistance. It's figuring out what's missing and who's got it and putting those two things together. So, but there's all sorts of really specific ways you can do that, but it's also at its most basic level that networking. All of that. These are all pathways that you can find that niche that emboldens your voice, that you want to step up and lead something in. And it doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to organize, the Midwest state's, first ever Louisiana-centric food symposium and invite Oxford and Cambridge. It'd be fun. But you could just have a meal with your neighbors and be a change maker. And that's what leadership is. So don't be thinking that I have to, open a business and offer farm planning services. Baby steps, because it's going to hurt. You're going to fall down. You're going to get busy. You're going to fail sometimes. I like to make my mistakes small first, if I can help it. Sometimes I blow things up on a really grand scale, because, broken noses help. But there's all of these different ways to get your passion moving the needle. That's what it's about, moving the needle, making noise, making things happen, moving things along. Next slide. So, one of the skills that we can use as leaders is really developing a narrative. And there's a little bit, there's a lot of different ways to talk about how we become effective leaders. A lot of it has to do with public speaking. A lot of it, whether it's around a dinner table with 4 friends, that's public speaking. Or whether it's in front of 500 students at the university, that's public speaking. And everything in between. But as a leader, we talk a lot about the skills that we have, but how do we engage people with our passion? So we're going to talk a little bit. This is just one tool to use. It's called public narrative. And that's what this worksheet is based around. Just one of those things. So your public narrative. Why do we tell our story? And I think that the success of organizing depends entirely on active participation and community leadership networks like this. This is how, when you come up against a challenge as a leader, you connect your cause to the community. I believe in storytelling very much. So you're going to hit challenges, and you're going to have a plan in place to how you react or not react to those challenges. There's a lot of different ways you can circumvent them, walk around it. You can facilitate the problem. Like I said, be brave. Show the movie that Monsanto funded. Why not? You're going to spark dialogue if that's your goal. So you have to be thinking about those challenges. So you can embrace and facilitate a challenge, welcome it, that saying, keep the spitting camels in your tent. I don't know why, sounds messy. You can avoid them. As a leader, you can avoid challenges. You can acknowledge that a challenge exists in your niche area and go, I'm so not dealing with that. I'm going to circle around to that in 10 years. And by then, it will be gone, more than likely. So there are all these options. Thinking about your challenges ahead of time, identifying your spitting camels, figuring out if you want them in your tent, you're just going to tie them up outside, you're going to set them free, or you're going to turn them into sausage, right? You've got a lot of good options.
Are you hungry?
I'm always hungry. So public narrative, it's a framework to explain the work that you as leaders do in a way that doesn't get caught up in the mechanics of program or strategy. What? Because we like to talk about the what a lot. It's easy, it's human nature to want to get into the what. But instead, use public narrative and you develop some skills to tell emotional stories, the why. The story of us, the story of self, and the story of now. So using those things, you can create a structure, a challenge, a choice, and an outcome. All good stories have those three elements: a challenge, a choice, and an outcome. So as a leader with a voice in the food systems realm, you're finding a niche that you want to lead in. Your challenge is to connect with people so that they value the challenge that you're laying out for them, that they may not know exists. They may not know that it's a challenge yet. So you're going to make them aware of the challenge, and then you're going to challenge them the way you have challenged yourself. And then you're going to have a choice on how to respond to that challenge. And then hopefully there's an outcome, there's a destination, there's a change, there's a process that you will facilitate for yourself in this process of becoming a leader, and then for the people that will follow your lead. That's the scary part about stepping into the role of leader. It doesn't always mean you have to walk at the front of the group. Sometimes when you're on a wilderness hike, you lead from the very back of the group. There's a lot of different ways to lead, but you need people to follow you in some sort of order if you are going to be a leader. There should be a video here. Can you click on the black? No. Well, usually if you just click in the box, it'll play. No?
You know, I have an idea.
Because if that doesn't play, I'll have to tell you the story, and it's much better if I don't tell the story.
I don't think my ideas don't work. I feel a lot, guys. I feel a lot.
Okay.
Failing forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's okay. Go back to the slide.
Wait.
This is one of my favorite stories. And this story is from a movie. There's a movie slide here. When we get it posted to Basecamp,
Yes.
there will be a video there, and it's awesome. But I'm going to tell you an abbreviated version of it. It's a book written by David Seals called Powwow Highway. And it's about a bunch of angry Indians who decide to put a roadblock up on the federal highway that goes through the reservation, and chaos ensues. And these rebels are sitting on the reservation, and behind them it's smokestacks and industry and extraction, and it's awful. And they're eating hot dogs from the gas station and nachos with that stuff that comes out of the pump.
Market basket.
From the market basket, that stuff, right?
It's a real thing.
But Filbert, who's enormous, has the mind of a leader, and he's trying to get his cousin, who has his cynical pants on so tight he can't breathe anymore, and he's forgotten the cultural relevance of storytelling. So Filbert says that Watillo, who's the trickster in the Cheyenne legends, it's Coyote, it's the creator of the universe. Says Watillo is walking by the creek, and it's a beautiful day, and he's got lots he's supposed to be doing, but instead he's walking by the creek. And all of a sudden he sees, floating on the water, the most beautiful plums he's ever seen. They're ripe and they're perfect, and they're everywhere, and they're just floating on the water. He's so excited he can taste them. And he dives into the creek, and they disappear. And he gets out on the bank, and they come back. And Watillo says, oh, Someone is playing a trick on me, the trickster. But I'm smart. I can get these plums. And so he waits, and the water stills, and the plums are still. And he dives in for the plums, and they disappear. 3 days later, his wife comes along looking for her husband. Hasn't seen him for days, and he is exhausted. He hasn't eaten. He didn't even bother to get a drink. He's just dying on the shore of the stream. His wife, there are these magical plums, and they tempt me. And I want them. I've been chasing them. I'm going to get them. Stupid dog of a dog! Those plums are on the tree, hanging over the creek. And you've wasted the whole week chasing shadows when you should have been at home with these plums for me. And she hit him over the head with a frying pan and took him home. One of my favorite stories. One, it's about food. Two, it's about how we may think we're onto something. And it's about our failure to look up, which DC eloquently illustrated with the PowerPoint projectors. As leaders, we will fall into all of those potential traps. But it also shows how we can take and own a culturally relevant story and message it appropriately and move people. I've known that story for 30 years, and it's still one of my favorites. It touched me, and it was a simple story, very simple, but I love it. The next one you'll have to wait and see. This is a much longer one, and this is from a storytelling festival. And as leaders, if you've never been to a storytelling festival, I highly encourage you to attend storytelling festivals at least once. Local, regional, statewide, national. They're fantastic. Plus, you'll learn all sorts of fantastic tricks for speaking, engaging, or eating lunch and then talking too much. Storytellers practice the art of leading at a very basic level that's deceptive, because there's so many tricks that you can use as a speaker to engage your audience and to reach people. Storytelling festivals are a great way to see like 900 speaking techniques in an afternoon. So I highly suggest it, and there's a really great story on there that we're going to skip right past.
Proudly in Central Louisiana, we probably had two of the best nationally known speakers.
Yeah.
And
In fact, this one from Timpanogos, but yeah, there's some great,
Do you want to share those on Basecamp?
yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah, I highly recommend
You've
it.
never seen Sylvia Davis or Rosa McDonald. You're missing a
Yes, yeah. And when you go, they're fun, so I don't want to ruin it, but put that leadership cap on and think about the technique that they're using, what you're seeing them do to get a story across, because they're really talking about the story of us and the story of now. They're talking all those stories. They've got challenges, choices, and outcomes. All of them do. And those are all things that you want to embrace as a leader. So do go to storytelling festivals and do analyze it a little bit when you're there. Not the whole time, but just a little bit. So public narrative, story of self, story of us, and story of now. Why am I called to this work, and why should people follow me? It's a great question to ask yourself. It's a good place to start. It's a really good place to start. And then actually answer it. Demonstrate individual values through a past challenge, choice, and outcome. Specific events that are visible. Describe things that people can see, smell, feel. Not the what, not the analyzing that we go to so quickly. Really personal things. Like I just stood up in front of you and told a ridiculous story, you know? Those are the sort of personal risks that we have to take. Why we matter. So from self to us. This is where we bring everybody to the table. This is where you try and find the people who share your passion in that place where you want to lead. And the story of now. What are we called to do right now? There's a choice and an outcome. And you will offer it to people through a public narrative that is based in personal and individual values. What will I be calling on others to do? What values move me to take action and might also inspire others to similar action? And what stories can I tell from my own life about specific people or events that would show what you want? It's just an easy little framework to try and find your public narrative that will move people to be engaged in what you're asking them to be engaged in. And telling. I do a lot of telling. This is harder than it looks. Some of you will embrace this and do this beautifully. I can tell from the presentations you did today. But for people like me, it's really hard to live in this space as a leader, because it's much easier to just tell people what to do. They don't always do it, but it's easier that way. This is harder. This is building a movement, and I am not going to shy away from saying that the right to food is in any way less than a civil right. I chose Marshall Gans as someone to connect you to because I think that there is a lot of correlation, that we have a lot of leftover civil rights issues tied up into our food system in a really complicated way. We can learn a lot from what happened that just started in the late 1950s and erupted in the 60s, that we're still trickling out of the civil rights movement. But don't for any second think that the right to food, that food justice is any less than that fight. The opposition is very well invested.
Yes.
Yeah, they want to keep it the way we made it. So this is hard, but not impossible. And this is just one tool. This is just one. There are thousands of tools out there to embolden your voice as a leader, but I had to just choose one. So thinking on these questions gets us to really digging into what's going to motivate your voice. Family and childhood, life choices, organizing experience. Parents and family. Where I live in an apartment complex. We haven't had hot water for 2.5 weeks. There was a gas leak that turned into 20, and everybody's freaking out and moving out. We're fine. I grew up without indoor plumbing. Boiling a gallon of water to have a peasant's bath is not a new thing, right? My neighbors feel like they're being, infringed upon because when they turn on the tap, the water that runs out of it that's clean and sanitary, it doesn't happen to be hot. And I'm like, well, a foot behind your sink is your stove. Fill pan, put on stove, right? Right. You're well on your way to clean. In fact, when I got to the hotel, I did take 2 hot showers that I'm not going to tell my husband about. I told him about the third one, not the first 2. But I got so much soap in my eyes the first time I had forgotten how it all worked. It's amazing how quickly you go back to what you knew. Those are the kind of personal stories, right? If I were going to have a voice about water and the importance of water in our food system, I might want to talk about the fact that we used to have to chip through 6 inches of ice on the river in the winter to drop the pump in, to pump water 800 feet up the hill to the gravity container so that it would feed back down into the house pressurized. I value water and indoor plumbing more than anyone my age you will ever meet. I love indoor plumbing. My husband works at a plumbing company. It's not a mistake. Very important to me. Very important to me.
Part of the interview.
He was a farmer when I married him. No, he's a chef. I turned him into a farmer. Now he's a plumber. I keep things really close. You get it, right? You're laughing with me about my fascination with indoor plumbing. Those are stories we can tell to get people to engage with us. And life choices. Marrying someone who knew something about plumbing was very important to me. He knows if there's no running water that he's calling Holiday Inn, right? So getting these things clear in your mind is what this worksheet is about. Because it has to make sense to you before it's going to make sense to anybody else. How am I doing on time? Am I out of time?
7:45.
Great. So this little worksheet, I use this a lot to help me sort of organize my thoughts around these things. Because it's important. If you have 3 minutes to talk to a group of elected officials about this thing, this enormous thing that is the food system, there is no rambling, there is no running over, and there's no stopping at 1:30. If you have 3 minutes with an audience who is obligated to listen to you, you stop at 3 minutes. You know what you're going to say. It's in your mind. It's clear. And this is just one tool to help you find that clarity, to have your voice in place. Organizing experience. I didn't used to think that this was very important, but it actually is. The civil rights had a big impact in my household growing up. In kindergarten, I went to a very liberal public school system, and we were having haiku education, you could say. We were writing haiku poems.
In kindergarten?
Yes. It was right after Salamander Week when we adopted the trees. No, public, actually.
California, right?
Yeah. So I said, hey, LBJ, how many babies you kill today? It was perfect, right? I got sent home with the first of many notes and warnings to my parents. The next one was about wearing clothes. Organizing is very important. It's how I was raised. You organize, you lead, you use your voice, you stand up, you subvert the dominant paradigm, it crumbles into dust, and you build what should be there, what is just and what is right. Organizing experience. How did you first taste this idea? You talked about it a little bit, Marianne. She brought you. She was like, oh, hey, you're new. You don't know. Let's go to this meeting, right? That's how you got here.
Compared resumes, and she was like, you also were a cat herder. How come one meeting?
Right.
Just one meeting.
Finding that also, because you're going to get people to organize. So what got you to organize may resonate with someone else. So don't discount any of these things. They're all really important to think about. Not always all at the same time, but always there. So this is the slide I promised you that's got Marshall Gann's web module on organizing. He's at Harvard. His entire module is on this website, and that'll be a link whenever it's on Basecamp. There are so many good models out there on how to do what we're asking you to do, which is to step up and be a leader. If you like to do research, look at as many as you have time to look at, to find little worksheets, to find little tricks. Go to the storytelling festivals. Those are so helpful. The important thing, though, is making it work. But again, you really don't need to start with this enormous thing. Wildfires start very small. And when you blow on them with a little wind and you feed them with a little tinder, and it doesn't rain, they get really big. And they're really hard to put out. And that's what we're going for, sustained, driven, consuming energy that comes out of all of you as leaders. And I think with the photo voice presentations tonight, everybody is still, even though a lot of you stood up here and said, I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I just know I'm doing. That's fair, but I actually think that you all hit on some really strong universal concepts. And I think that as this group continues to come together, I think that those will start to clarify a little bit for everybody. And I think that there's a lot of resources in this room and a lot of skills in this room. So I'm not worried. Everybody's going to find a path and start taking some baby steps down it, or maybe they're, some of you are just going to drop big old bombs and blow things up right away. That's okay too,